sincerely believed, in God we trust, should hereafter be inscribed upon all our national coin.
This has been an American Minute with Bill Federer. For a free transcript, call American Minute at 1-888-USA-WORD.
VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at vcyamerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
And in for Jim Schneider, I am Dalton Windsor. We thank you very much for joining us today on Crosstalk. Well, everyone agrees that the year 2020, the year 2021 were unprecedented. And falling right in line with the past 2 years is 2022. As we begin this broadcast today, the scenes are devastating. The horror of Putin's war on Ukraine, that would be Vladimir Putin's war on Ukraine, the loss of innocent life, and a world that is seemingly doing nothing but what we're doing, watching. And many are also praying. We have a history over these past several years. We see where this is not the first time that Vladimir Putin has invaded. Of course, we remember the invasion of Georgia. We remember the invasion of Crimea, which incidentally also was under Biden's watch, under the Obama-Biden administration. And here today, in just the second year of Biden's presidency, we are once again seeing an invasion. Looking at a article from Liberty Counsel, lc.org, and we'll share some info from this. We'll be being joined by Matt Staver here momentarily. But a headline saying that a weak White House makes a world of difference. And in a time where there is so much heartbreak and so much tragic images of war, many are asking, is Joe Biden trying to divert attention from the reality of what's going on by his nomination just this past week, his nomination to the Supreme Court to replace Justice Stephen Breyer? We'll share just a moment here from last Friday's nomination announcement.
Good afternoon. Today, as we watch freedom and liberty under attack abroad, I'm here to fulfill my responsibilities under the Constitution to preserve freedom and liberty here in the United States of America. And it's my honor to introduce to the country a daughter of former public school teachers, a proven consensus builder, an accomplished lawyer, a distinguished jurist, one of the nation's most prestigious courts. My nominee for the United States Supreme Court is Judge Ketanji Jackson. You know, 4 weeks ago, when a member of the court, a friend of mine, we used to work together in the Senate, Justice Stephen Breyer, announced his retirement, I said then, choosing someone to serve on the United States Supreme Court is one of the most serious constitutional responsibility a president has, and I mean it. I promised the process would be rigorous, that I would select a nominee worthy of Justice Breyer's legacy of excellence and decency. Someone extremely qualified, with a brilliant legal mind, with the utmost character and integrity, which are equally as important.
To help us understand, know a little bit more about President Biden's latest nominee for the Supreme Court, we do welcome back to Crosstalk today Matt Staver, the founder and chairman of Liberty Counsel. Matt is a constitutional attorney with over 300 published legal opinions, Matt has authored 8 scholarly law review publications and 10 books. He has filed numerous briefs and argued in many federal and state courts. He has also argued 2 landmark cases before the U.S. Supreme Court. And as we often also like to include, he's a favorite here on Crosstalk. So, Matt, we welcome you back. Thank you for your time today.
Well, thank you. It's good to be with you.
We just shared there at the beginning a little bit about this we read from Liberty Counsel, your website, lc.org, about a weak White House makes a world of difference, and some of the comments that you had made there regarding, the timing of all that is going on. And last Friday, not quite a week ago, we see Joe Biden, many are saying, is he trying to divert attention from America's weakness right now?
Well, I think he is. If you go back to 2014, when it was the Obama-Biden administration, you had Russia invade Crimea, took over a very strategic location that was part of Ukraine, and invaded that country, took over its oil reserves and other natural resources, including one of its very strategic ports. And then now Biden, 1 year into his administration, just beginning the second year, you have Russia invading Ukraine, the whole nation of Ukraine, not just coming into certain parts of it, but the entire nation of Ukraine. And I think what you see happening here on the world scale, which is very concerning, is that the world, those aggressive leaders, Russia's Putin, Iran, China, those individual countries, they sense weakness, and they see weakness in this administration. And this administration has not taken significant action as it should. It has imposed certain sanctions, but some of the serious sanctions that are really crippling that could be imposed have not been instituted. In fact, on the very first day that Biden was in office, he stopped the XL pipeline. Now we're buying oil from Russia. Essentially, America is financing the Russian war on Ukraine. And when you look at what's happening on the ground in Ukraine, and in fact, just a few moments ago, we were doing a television program in one of our broadcast with regards to somebody who's in Ukraine right now. And we have eyewitness information coming from these people of Ukraine. Whatever you think about the governments of Russia and Ukraine or America, the fact is no innocent civilians should be targeted, and innocent civilians are being targeted and slaughtered throughout Ukraine. It is decimated over there in these places where Russia is attacking. Hospitals are under attack. Schools are being bombed. Private or personal, individual neighborhoods are being attacked and so forth. Lots of citizens are being destroyed and lots of carnage that's taking place. It's a tragedy. And it's a tragedy that I think was timed in part because of this administration. So instead of focusing on some of that issue, what happened is the invasion occurred on February the 23rd. On February the 25th, Biden then announces his Supreme Court nominee. I think it's no question that he should have delayed that announcement, but I think there's no question he wants to divert attention from what's happening and the weakness abroad, not only in Afghanistan, where we left people behind and really became an embarrassment in the world, but also the tragedy that's unfolding right now in Ukraine, trying to divert attention from those failures, catastrophic as they are, to then announce his nomination for the Supreme Court.
Matt, just to go back a few moments on something that you reminded us of is on day one of Joe Biden's presidency, he shut down the pipeline, and what a thought, and what you said there about how we essentially we in America are now purchasing oil from Russia, hence are actually funding the Ukraine attack.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That the money that we're spending that we could have otherwise been exporting from our oil production and supplying the oil to the rest of the world, we're now buying from Russia. And that money that we're spending in buying oil from Russia and allowing Russia to export this oil, obviously they can use that to finance this war against the people of Ukraine. So, it's a real tragedy that's taking place. This is a catastrophic failure. Weakness in the White House does make a huge difference, not only domestically but internationally, and we're seeing it unfold in our very eyes. Obviously, we need to in prayer. We need to be involved in our government. And obviously elections have consequences. We need to pray for this country and certainly pray for the people, the innocent civilians that are part of this conflict over in Ukraine.
Elections have consequences. We often hear that. We say that. We quote that. Many contend, however, Matt, that the last election, our true voice, was not heard.
Yeah, that's right. And so I think there's so much going on here, and we just need to be in prayer, and we need to be involved in this next election that's coming up, and just make our values heard every time, whether it's for city council, school board, whatever it may be, President of the United States, whatever it is. Obviously, our vote and our voice matter. So
the nominee, Ketanji Brown Jackson, President Joe Biden's choice to replace the retiring Justice Stephen Breyer, is she one of our nation's brightest legal minds? That's what has been. That's what he said. And what do we know about her?
Well, she, obviously it was a very questionable scenario when he announced that he was going to nominate a black female. So he not only narrowed it down to race, but also to gender. Now, Ronald Reagan said he wanted to appoint the first female to the Supreme Court, and he did that with Sandra Day O'Connor. Mm-hmm. And obviously, look what we got. We got a bad choice with Sandra Day O'Connor. Reagan was wrong in doing that. If we wanted to appoint someone, sure, appoint someone, but appoint them based upon their qualities and their characteristics and their ability. Choosing somebody back then was a big mistake for Ronald Reagan because he chose the wrong woman to put on the Supreme Court, and she ultimately issued many terrible precedent throughout her lifetime, including a very strong vote for abortion throughout her tenure in the Supreme Court. But here, Biden's gone even further. He's gone further to placate his constituency, and he has allowed the tail essentially to wag the dog. That is, his constituency is running his agenda. And so he said he was going to nominate a black female, and that's what he did. Now, is she the best that could be on the Supreme Court? Well, there's a lot of questions about that. She's 52 years of age. She's got a great credentialed background, if you will, with regards to education that might be very impressive on paper, and that is a Harvard undergraduate and a Harvard law degree as well. She's been a judge on the lower court and was confirmed last year in 2021 as a judge on the Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit. She is now, as of last week, she has issued one opinion on the Court of Appeals, and that was the singular opinion that she issued, and she released that the day before she was announced for the nomination. But the real question is, what is her position on the Constitution? And she is going to be one of those individuals that falls in the judicial activist category. She clerked for Justice Stephen Breyer. Breyer is someone who's been a vote for more liberal, non-original intent kind of decisions on the Supreme Court. And I think she's going to fall in that same category as well. Obviously, NARAL, the National Abortion Rights Action League, they've already endorsed her, and that should tell you a lot right there.
We are talking about President Biden's nominee to replace Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer, and the nominee is Ketanji Brown Jackson. And just learning a little bit more about her, we're up against the break here any second here. When we come back, it might be worthy, Matt, to just get your comment on kind of where you were beginning to go there with, what difference may she really be able to make with the balance of the court and such. No change should be made with the balance with just this one nomination and replacement here. But get your comments on that and several other things that we would like to hear you comment on regarding Biden's nominee to the latest nominee to the U.S. Supreme Court. And we'll do that when Crosstalk continues.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, author and seminar speaker with the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, today's a heavy topic. Is there a scientific explanation for suicide bombers?
Chris, our world today is on edge because of a suicidal terrorist. Since evolution claims to be a theory of everything, there must be an evolutionary explanation for even this self-destructive behavior. And sure enough, some evolutionists are now saying that suicidal tendencies are a variation of an evolutionary adaptation that was previously useful in some evolutionary sense. Creationists just stand back and wonder how they can be so misguided, so deceived. The Bible says that man was created initially in a very good state, in the image of God. Yet when Adam rebelled against God's order, creation was permanently distorted, and now we live in a world dominated by sin's ruinous effects. Chris, so you see, what began back in Genesis continues today, even with suicidal bombers.
Thanks, Dr. Morris.
Back on Crosstalk on the VCY America radio network. If you are just joining us, it was last Friday morning that the White House announced D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson as being President Joe Biden's choice to replace the retiring Justice Stephen Breyer on the U.S. Supreme Court. And so Matt Staver joins us here today as we unpack a little bit of this story, just to find out more about this nominee. And Matt, just in getting back here, obviously she's not going to change the balance of the court.
No, she's not going to change the balance of the court on most issues because Justice Breyer is going to probably be voting in the same way that she would ultimately end up voting on most of these situations. She clerked for Justice Breyer, so she obviously is in that same judicial philosophy, if you will, of a Justice Breyer, and that is not someone who would be focused on original intent or original meaning of the Constitution. So in this particular case, I don't think it's going to change the balance of the votes necessarily on most cases. However, it will elongate that particular position. She's 52 years of age, and she obviously can be in that position for quite a few decades with good health and so forth. So that's, really the main concern. And the real question, I think, beyond that is whether or not she can build consensus. Her writing has been basically analyzed already by some other individuals, and her writing does not seem to be up to the same par of the recent nominees that joined the court, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Barrett. But at the same time, the real question is, can she have a consensus capability that Breyer does not have? And if she does that, the question is whether she can bring somebody to her side that Breyer might not have otherwise been able to bring to his position.
Matt, some are calling Jackson, some are calling her a radical. Do you align with that? Do you understand why they're saying this?
Well, yeah, I think, she, here's something that's a little, she obviously, in 2018, before that, she actually, in a case called McGuire versus Riley, she was listed as counsel in this amicus brief that was filed at the Court of Appeals on behalf of several pro-abortion groups, including the Abortion Access Project of Massachusetts, NARAL, which is the National Abortion Rights Action League, Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice, and another one as well. It was a case involving pro-life sidewalk counselors, and consequently, she was the one who was, along with another attorney in her law firm, assigned to write that amicus brief. So obviously you can see why NARAL supports her nomination. NARAL sees her as another vote for abortion. And really, I think that's really the issue about this. And your position on abortion as it relates to the Constitution, whether or not the Constitution would, quote, support abortion, whether there's a so-called right of an abortion in the Constitution, or whether there's not a right to abortion in the Constitution, the answer to that question really is revealing as to what your judicial philosophy is. Is this a Constitution that is the rule of law? Do we have to look at the original history and the intent and meaning and follow it? If so, there is no way it has anything to do with supporting abortion in any shape or form. On the other hand, if you're going to try to cast a vote for abortion, no matter what it is, part of abortion, whether it's partial birth abortion or any other aspect of abortion. You're going to cast a vote for abortion, and you're going to say that it's based in the Constitution. That's quite revealing, and that means that you don't really look at the text and the history of the Constitution. If you're not going to do that on abortion, then what is to say you're going to do that in anything else? If the Constitution doesn't mean what it says, then we have no rule of law. It's just a vote by a judge. It just becomes political. The Supreme Court avoids being a political machine if and when it adheres to the Constitution. If we, the people, don't like the result of where the Constitution ultimately leads in that case, then the Constitution has a mechanism for us to amend it. But that's not the role of judges. And if a judge thinks his or her role is to essentially rewrite the Constitution or use it as a springboard, that's very concerning.
Matt, looking at who Jackson would be replacing in Stephen Breyer, and so many saying, well, this nominee is a radical. Was Breyer kind of considered the same?
Yeah, Breyer would be in that same category. He's not a textualist or what would be called a constitutionalist. He would be looking at sort of the end justifies the means in many cases. And that's not to say he's not going to look at a text, a particular statute, and follow the statute on those different occasions. But when you get to a place where it is a very moral, controversial, social issue, like abortion, like marriage as an example, that really tests whether somebody is true to the Constitution or not. And if they're not, they can ultimately impose their own personal views and values. And they can write as though it's part of the Constitution when it's really nothing to do with the Constitution. And I think that's where you're going to have Breyer and this nominee, Judge Brown. You're going to have Brown Jackson. You're going to have those coming out in the same end result on some of those major hot-button social and politically charged issues.
Matt Staver joining us here on Crosstalk as we unpack the headlines on President Biden's Supreme Court nominee, Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. There's one headline you may have been privy to, Matt, talking about that she's been acknowledged in a Senate confirmation questionnaire that she was the author of a paper published anonymously that charged the American judicial system was unfair to sex offenders. Have you heard about this one?
Yeah, I have heard about that, and that's in some of her past nomination processes. She's been on the district court, lower court, and then the Court of Appeals. So that information has come up. She has a past background of being involved in the criminal justice area of work. And so that's probably where this is coming from. But it is concerning. She also, was asked about her judicial philosophy during her last round of confirmation, and she was very vague as to what she believed, and she essentially said that she didn't really have much of a position on some of this, and it's very odd. She's going to be asked those questions again. I think she's going to be certainly pressed to get what her judicial activist or her judicial philosophy is. Is she an activist or a constitutionalist, frankly? Does she believe in a living constitution? She was asked that question before Justice was, and this is going to be a big question for any justice on the Supreme Court, and she seemed to try to evade that question, which is very concerning.
You mentioned all of these questions that will be clearly coming her way. Do you see much of a challenge, though, in her confirmation?
Well, here's the problem that you've got. You've got 50 votes in the 50 Democrats and 50 senators, and you have a 50-50 split with the vice president who is able to cast a tie vote breaker vote. So that gives 51 to the Democrats if they all join together. But you also have two Republicans that have been more favorable to abortion, and for them this may be a big issue, and that is Senator Collins of Maine and Lisa Murkowski of Alaska. We don't know where they're going to vote on this particular nomination, but we can kind of look at what happened last time around, just last year, and you had a couple of Republicans that actually voted for Brown Jackson. So it's going to be close. However, I think this needs to be clearly vetted, and it needs to be out in the open exactly all of these different questions that are coming up. What is her judicial philosophy? She needs to explain it.
So you don't predict anything like what Justice Kavanaugh had to go through?
No, I don't predict that. You know why? Because when the shoe's on the other foot,
exactly.
People don't go to those kind of horrible lengths. Basically, more conservative individuals and the Republicans don't go to those kinds of terrible lengths to just try to invent things to tear people down. If you look at the huge controversies that have come up in the nominations, you've got Clarence Thomas, and who led that charge? Joe Biden. Joe Biden did.
Yes.
Joe Biden opposed Clarence Thomas, a very highly educated, qualified African-American who has served on the court now the longest of any other justice on the Supreme Court. And Joe Biden is the one who led that vitriolic opposition to him to try to really destroy his character. The next one was Kavanaugh, and that was also led by Democrats to literally destroy Kavanaugh's character as well. It's a shame. It has nothing to do with the confirmation process. It really needs to focus on not inventing certain kinds of things to destroy a person's character, but we really need to know about how are they going to operate as a judge or justice in this particular case. That's the real focus.
Speaking of Clarence Thomas, I did not see him at the State of the Union address. I don't know, are Supreme Court justices required to be at these, or how does that work?
No, Supreme Court justices are not required to be at those. And in fact, if you remember during Obama's time frame when the Supreme Court issued a decision, Obama chastised the Supreme Court as they're sitting there on the front row. And at that point in time, from then on, some of the Supreme Court justices decided they're not going to attend the State of the Union addresses anymore, and they're not going to be a part of this political charade or get publicly castigated as they're sitting there on the front row. So I'm not surprised why Clarence Thomas wasn't there, and I'm not surprised why some of them have avoided these State of the Union addresses since Obama did this when he was president.
Yeah. With just a moment or two left before our next break here, any takeaways while we're talking about the State of the Union address on back Tuesday night? Any takeaways in your opinion on that?
Well, I think Biden is living in Never Land. He's trying to suggest that America is great. It's operating well under his term. And anything can be further from the truth. I mean, he has the lowest ratings imaginable for a person in just finishing 1 year of term. We are in a very difficult situation, both domestically as well as internationally. And then he takes time to placate, the transgender youth and says he's always going to be their president for them. I think it was just a, I don't have the opportunity. It's hard for me to say anything good about the State of the Union because it's just a big political charade under this presidency.
That's very unfortunate to hear you say, but many clearly understand why you say that. Matt Staver is our guest today. We're already up against our next break. We'll come back, talk just a few more points here on this latest nominee to the U.S. Supreme Court. And then also, let's talk a little bit about our nation's military and some of these mandates that apparently, Matt, are still there's still pressure on these mandates, correct?
Yeah, there's very much pressure on these mandates. We're still litigating. I can give you some updates about what's happened recently in our military case, just as recently as last night.
Have you ever had someone attempt to talk to you about the Watchtower Society or the Book of Mormon? Or perhaps a friend has told you they've started yoga and invite you to participate. You know you heard something about these religions and teachings, but never had the material in your hand to give a biblical response to their teachings. Well, now you can. Two world-renowned researchers, Dr. Ron Carlson and Ed Decker, have teamed up to write Fast Facts on False Teachings, an easy-to-use resource guide that gives you quick, clear facts about several cults and false teachings. You'll find chapters on atheism, Freemasonry, Hinduism and yoga, Islam, Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormonism, and much more. Fast Facts on False Teachings is available for a donation of $16 or more by writing VCY America at 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin 53208. To make your donation by phone, call 1-800-729-9829. That's 1-800-729-9829.
And we are back on Crosstalk. Our guest today is, well, the founder and chairman of Liberty Counsel, Matt Staver, constitutional attorney, and we're always very happy to have him weigh in on so much that is going on. Before we go ahead and revisit some of these latest things we hit on just before the break, Matt, regarding our military and some of these vaccine mandates that are still being pushed. We have been unpacking this story on the U.S. Supreme Court nominee, Ketanji Brown Jackson, and so many folks have weighed in. Ted Cruz of Texas saying he doesn't think the GOP would never go down the same path as Democrats have recently in launching personal attacks against her. She is likely to be confirmed. We've already talked about that a little bit here today. What about this story where she has actually represented some suspected terrorists in the past as a federal public defender, something of defending a prisoner at Guantanamo Bay? Have you read that headline?
Yeah, I have. I don't know a lot of details about that particular situation. Sometimes as a public defender or some other way, you get assigned to certain individuals to represent, and you have to represent them. On the other hand, you can also say that you don't want to be a part of that situation. So I think that's one of the issues that we'll have to really explain more and delve into more during this confirmation process. She had another situation that's a little interesting. She actually served on the board of Montrose Christian School in Maryland, which is a private school. That particular school actually had a statement of faith that indicated its support of the unborn and the sanctity of all human life from conception to natural death, and that marriage should be limited to a man and woman. So she served on that board. When she was asked about that during her April 2021 confirmation hearings to the Court of Appeals by one of the senators, she said to Josh Hawley that she has served on many boards and did not necessarily agree with all the statements that those boards might have in their materials. I find that pretty odd that she chose to distance herself from this school and that she would serve on a board where she doesn't agree with this particular school. So I don't know what to make of that. Obviously, it's interesting that she served on a board that had that kind of statement of faith, but then she distanced herself from it when she was actually responding to a conservative Republican senator, and she did not have to distance herself from that question, but she did, and she distanced herself from that statement of faith, which means obviously she's distancing herself from the pro-life and the pro-marriage position of that school.
Matt, how long is this process going to take? I mean, or I guess we could maybe better ask the question, how soon will she be confirmed for this?
Well, we really don't know. Kavanaugh looked like it was going to be a short period of time, and it got extended and it got extended. So we don't know. I don't anticipate we're going to see that kind of, as Senator Cruz said, that they're not going to have that kind of assault on somebody's character that you saw with Kavanaugh, or going even further back to Thomas. I mean, it could be that she is confirmed before the end of the term, if in fact all goes well and she has the votes. And of course, there's a lot to be said between now and then. So nothing is for sure. She hasn't gotten the votes, so we haven't had the hearings, and so we just have to wait and see how these hearings unfold.
When does the term end?
The term ends at the end of June. Of course, Breyer will stay on the court through the end of the term until the final decision is released, and then sometime thereafter he'll vacate, and then that position, depending upon when this confirmation happens, if it does happen, and there's a favorable vote, will be filled.
And remind us when the questions and the process actually will officially begin.
Well, there's nothing been said in the Senate, but according to Biden, he wants the hearings to begin in April. And so those hearings will begin fairly soon, assuming that schedule continues, and the hearings could go on for several days, depending upon what happens during those hearings. That would then be followed by a vote. So it could be, if all went quickly, it could be at the end of April, could be May, but it could be drug on beyond that as well. We have to wait and see.
Well, it's always great having Matt Staver on with us. It's also always great having you listening with us across the network, listening to Crosstalk today. And maybe you would like to weigh in with us here and ask a question regarding this latest nominee to the Supreme Court. We're going to open up our phone lines. You can call in 1-800-733-9829, 1-800-733-9829, as we'll get you in line and get you to Matt Staver here to visit about this or something else that maybe we have hit on. Something that we went to in the first segment, Matt, and if any other presidents, say we went back to President Trump and he had said, well, I'm going to base my decision on a nominee based on gender and based on skin color.
Oh, my goodness, you would have an outcry. It would be considered sexist and racist. There's no question about it. There seems to be, obviously, and we all see that, a double standard between what the Democrats are doing, what the Republicans do. There's always been a double standard. And so, you asked about the State of the Union, and Biden says whatever he thinks people want to hear sometimes, or at least his constituency wants to hear. Like, he wants to now say, oh, we need to fund the police, not defund the police. Yet, he was on the opposite side on that issue, and Kamala Harris was on the opposite side, and she supported all the rioters that even took over some of the police precincts. So, there's a double standard out there, and I think people are frankly tired of it.
Tired of it, and many seeing through that, too. Surely they're seeing through that at this point.
Well, I would hope so. And, we're seeing this with regards to some of our military case. I mean, we have seen unbelievable just attempts to violate the law. In fact, last night we got a ruling from the judge in our military case where we're seeking class certification to represent all the men and women of all the branches of the military to protect them from these vaccine mandates because of their religious objections and requests for accommodation. The other side wanted to have the judge set aside his ruling while they appeal. And they had this unbelievable statement of briefing that they set in front of the court. The court last night issued a ruling and just literally shredded the Department of Defense under Joe Biden, as though, and he said that they're operating as though the Religious Freedom Restoration Act doesn't even apply to them. That's lawlessness, and that's what we see happening. The law is being completely disregarded in some of these situations under this administration, and we're seeing it firsthand with regards to how the other side, how the Department of Defense, represented by the Department of Justice, are operating literally trying to operate as though they are above the law, and the judge just really castigated them last night in a 20-page ruling.
What's next beyond that?
Well, we have a hearing next week, Thursday, in the federal court in Tampa. So we'll return to court next week, Thursday. The other side has appealed the ruling that we got. We're pressing forward with a full press to get class protection for every man and woman in the military. There's over 24,000 that have filed these religious exemptions. And I'm sad to say one of our military chaplains called us earlier this week and spoke to one of our attorneys, and he just got back from a funeral of someone that he had interviewed and affirmed that he had a sincerely held religious belief. He and his wife are both in the military. The pressure got so great for this young man, and the punishments that were coming down on him for not getting the COVID shot, he went into the back of the house, pulled up a revolver, and took his own life. And that just happened. The funeral just occurred early this week. He took his life last week. This is not the first suicide that we have been told of by our plaintiffs, of people that they know personally, either in their platoon or, in this case, the chaplain knew and had counseled with this man and the woman on their religious exemption request. It's a real tragedy of the pressure that is being placed on these men and women. And, for example, if one person, like we have one who's in Hawaii and was supposed to go over to another location temporarily en route to their next location, it was only going to be a short training. That person is now separated, has been separated from his family for over 160 days now. He's kind of in limbo. He can't go back. He can't go forward. He's stuck in the middle, and his family can't join him. We've had people that are living out of their cars or out of hotels on their own dime because they sent their furniture to be moved, and then after their furniture left to go to the place where they were being repositioned, redeployed, they were told, well, you can't, you have to stop right there where you are because you are one of these people that gave the religious exemption request. So literally, on one side of the country are their cars and their furniture. On the other side of the country is where they live, and they're living day to day on their own money. They're not getting a stipend, and they're stuck in limbo. I mean, it is a tragedy of the highest magnitude that's happening under Joe Biden's watch. And
so weakening to the U.S. Military.
Yeah, at a time that we need the military at its strongest. This is weakening in the military. It's causing incredible loss of morale, loss of lives because of what we just talked about with some of these people, not only some taking their lives, some of them getting injured by the shot, and others are being forced out. It's a purge of the military of unimaginable magnitude at a time where we see Russia, China, and Iran threatening global security and peace.
Do not like hearing you say those things, but you are spot on and correct in saying that. Let's go to the telephone. We invited their calls. Greg is in Tucson, Arizona. Thanks for calling Crosstalk. You're on with Matt Staver.
Gosh, I'm so sorry to hear that. So I've just been praying the peace of Christ over that soldier's family. Oh, my goodness.
Thank you.
If I can go back to the nomination and the idea of abortion, I belong to America's party. The Republican Party left me. And over abortion, among other reasons. The Constitution does not exist without the Declaration of Independence. Abe Lincoln, and I'm paraphrasing, I don't have the exact quote, but Abe Lincoln said the Constitution was a silver frame adorning an apple of gold, meaning the Declaration. And, had my candidate, Alan Keyes, and then Tom Hoefling following him, day one in the White House, they would have ended all abortion. I mean, if you look at Articles 5 and 7 in the Constitution, they specifically cite persons. And we all know that it's a person in the womb. And it so disappoints me that we still debate these things. Somebody's got to have the courage to just end it all, regardless of the fallout that occurs from that. So thank you for taking my call.
Oh, thank you. This issue of abortion and the Supreme Court is one of the most tragic chapters in American history. Millions, over 60 million children have lost their lives. And when we're talking about children, we're talking also about women. Mothers have lost their life. Mothers have lost their dignity. Some have lost their hope. Many have gotten healed through Jesus Christ when they give their lives to Christ and realize what has happened. But it is a tragedy of incredible proportions, and the Supreme Court needs to rectify this terrible wrong that it imposed, and we the people. I mean, back then in 1973, when this came down, we the people should have said, that may be your opinion, but that's not in the Constitution.
And, Greg, we thank you for calling. Zach is standing by for our next caller in Wisconsin. Crosstalk will continue after this short break. Please stay with us.
the Worldview Report, I'm Brandon House. Our website is worldviewreport.com. All the eyes of the world are on Ukraine and Russia, but broadcast partner Dr. Peter Vincent Pry warns Americans to be very careful of propaganda that would desire to see America drawn into a war in Ukraine, a war with Russia. Why is this dangerous? For many levels, we're talking about then two nuclear nations, America and Russia, bumping up against each other. Only makes for the possibility of a misfire, miscommunication, a nuclear war. There's also no American national interest in Ukraine. The Biden regime has made so many blunders. One has to wonder if they're blundering their way into a war on purpose, not only to cover their mistakes and national crisis back at home, but also to further erode America on the world stage and bring about a new global superpower. America no longer, but China and Russia, and bring down America. I'm Brandon House.
Back for our final segment of Crosstalk. Our guest today, Matt Staver, and Zach is calling from River Falls, Wisconsin. Zach, thank you for calling Crosstalk. You're on the air with Matt Staver.
Hi, I just wanted to ask, what was the original intended purpose of the Supreme Court supposed to be? Because if it wasn't for the Democrats running to the Supreme Court as a fourth branch of government, we don't have gay marriage and abortion all across the land.
Yeah, it was the weakest of the three branches of government. And in fact, it's even set up that way. It's Article 3. Article 1 is the legislative branch. Article 2 is the executive. Article 1 obviously is the most powerful because that's the people, representatives enacting laws. Article 2 is the executive enforcing the laws. Article 3, the next one, the weakest of the branch, to resolve cases and controversies. So up until the 1930s, for example, the Supreme Court bounced around in various places, in the basement of the Senate, basement of the House, because it didn't have its own location. It wasn't until around the mid-1930s that it got its own current, now, Supreme Court building. That kind of shows you where it was in terms of the pecking order. And consequently, what ultimately happened is in the 50s and 60s, we had some justices on the Supreme Court that became judicial activists. And the whole trajectory of the Supreme Court changed, and we the people allowed it. And then that ultimately laid the groundwork for 1973 Roe v. Wade. And then, obviously, you have the 2015 marriage case. So it really has gone far beyond its original intent and its constitutional parameter.
All right, Zach, thank you for the call.
Yep.
All right, we have another Greg on the line, this time from Minnesota. Greg, thanks for calling Crosstalk.
Yeah, thank you for taking my call. I was just curious because with Jackson probably replacing Breyer, I mean, it doesn't really change the dynamics of the Supreme Court, but do you think there's something behind Breyer retiring now?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And the reason why is he had a lot of pressure from various sources within the Democratic Party and the administration to retire. Why? Because the midterms are coming up.
Yes.
And it is highly likely that the Democrats will lose control of the Senate, and they would not have the votes to confirm any nominee to the Supreme Court that Biden would choose. Ginsburg, if you go back and you look at what she did, she wanted to hold out. She thought for sure Hillary Clinton was going to win, and she wanted to have her replacement nominated, no doubt, by the first female president. She was probably the second most disappointed person during the election, Hillary Clinton being the first one, Justice Ginsburg being the second, because now she realized she's going to have to hold out for another 4 years, and we know, obviously, that she died during that time, and that's the reason why Justice Barrett is on the United States Supreme Court. They didn't want to make that same mistake, if you will, again, and so Breyer was fine to continue. And if there was a Republican president in the White House, I have no doubt that Breyer would not have resigned. He would still be serving as a justice.
No, that makes sense. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Greg, for calling. Jason is in Wisconsin. Thank you for calling Crosstalk. You're on with Matt Staver.
Thank you. Matt, the military doctors you represent who compared the last year's medical information versus the previous 5 years, I have heard that they maybe said that last 5 years was erroneous and they removed it from the public eye. Is that any of that true or no?
Yeah, what happened is this came out. Now, I don't think it's erroneous, but this is what the Department of Defense said. This was medical records, and there was nothing really different between the previous 5 years and 2021, except catastrophically increased numbers of neurological conditions and heart conditions and so forth. And so the only thing that changed was the COVID shots that came out in 2021. So when that was revealed, then what did the Department of Defense do? They took it offline. They said, oh, well, there's got to be a glitch there. They took it offline so you couldn't go back and review the data. And then eventually they put it back online, and they tried to remanipulate the numbers in the previous 5 years. It's a mess. It's a mess to try to go against that narrative. But the fact is that these doctors, the reason why they actually did the investigation regarding the medical codes is not because they saw medical codes. They didn't go investigate those first. Several military doctors got together and they said, you know what, I'm seeing a lot of increase now in 2021 in my patients. These are military doctors treating military patients. I'm seeing a big increase in neurological conditions, myocarditis, heart attacks, other kinds of conditions as well, miscarriages, at an astronomical number that I've never seen before. That's what led them to go back and say, well, let's look at the medical codes. And lo and behold, the medical codes confirmed what these doctors had been seeing in their treatment of military patients.
Okay, Jason, thank you for the call.
Thank you.
And Rich is in Wisconsin. Thanks for calling Crosstalk. Hello, Rich.
To say I don't consider myself a Democratic or a Republican person. My made-up party would be as that I am a Christian constitutionalist. This is a big distraction, this pick for Supreme Court judge nomination, but got a hypothetical question for Matt. We must win the House, but then if we won the House, we get to choose our majority speaker. Is there a possibility, do you think, that it could be Trump?
Well, no, not unless he was a member of the House, because you choose the speaker. I mean, typically what they do is they choose it from the individuals who are in the House, who are already elected, and they choose one of those. And I don't see that he has any intention of running for the U.S. House. I think that the absent some of the issues that we saw in 2020, I think that in the midterm elections, the Democrats will lose control of the Senate and likely almost certainly lose control of the House as well.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, Rich in Wisconsin, thank you. And that has been something that has circulated. Folks, many wishful thinking maybe, Matt, that they could somehow see Trump get back into some kind of a position to serve. But the jury's still out, if you will, on the fact that he may still be going to make another presidential run. We don't know yet, right?
Yeah, you never know. He might be looking at that for the next go-around. And so that being the case, I don't think he would look at anything at the U.S. Congress, particularly the House.
Thanks to all of you that have phoned in. Matt, your website, if you would share that with us, please.
Yes, our website is very simple, lc.org. That's lc.org.
All right. Thank you for your time today. We say that on behalf of all of us, Matt. We appreciate so much what you do. And listeners, be praying for Matt and his team at Liberty Counsel as they continue the fight for we the people, freedom here in the United States of America. Take care, Matt.
Thank you.
And for you listening, thank you for coming along today on Crosstalk.
You've been listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Tape Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208, or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.